Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good evening. In just a moment, it'll be time for Headliners, the show where we look at what's in tomorrow's papers. But first, the latest news with Polly.
I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom, and your top story. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson and other world leaders have all agreed to introduce an unprecedented package of sanctions in the event of a Russian incursion into Ukraine. A virtual meeting was held this evening with leaders, including the US President Joe Biden, agreeing the move if Russian troops cross the border. In the meeting, Boris Johnson also emphasised the need to support Ukraine's defences. The US has added up to 8,500 of its troops are ready to deploy if tensions rise.
We have been consulting with allies in deployments and refining plans for all scenarios. We've always said we would reinforce our allies on the eastern flank, and those conversations and discussions have certainly been part of what our national security officials have been discussing with their counterparts now for several weeks. In fact, we've never ruled out the option of providing additional assistance in advance of an invasion.
Jen Suckis there. Away from international news, Number 10 has confirmed staff did gather in the Cabinet Room to mark the Prime Minister's 56th birthday on the 19th of June 2020. That's during the first lockdown. According to an ITV News report, up to 30 people are alleged to have attended the event, which was organised by the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie. A spokesperson says the Prime Minister was at the gathering for less than 10 minutes. Later that evening, Number 10 confirmed the Prime Minister also hosted a small number of family members outside within COVID rules at the time. They denied ITV reports that the event was held indoors. The Transport Secretary has announced that post-travel testing in England will be scrapped from the 11th of February. That's ahead of the half-term school holidays. Speaking in the House of Commons today, Grant Shapps said that double-vaccinated passengers arriving in the UK will no longer need to test. Shapps also said travel testing has outlived its usefulness, as Britain is now one of the most vaccinated countries in the world.
Today, I can confirm to the House, Mr. Speaker, that our international travel regime will also now be liberalised as part of our efforts to ensure that 2022 is the year in which restrictions on travel, on lockdowns and limits on people's lives are firmly placed in the past.
Grant Shapps. In the United States, 3 former police officers who were on the scene of George Floyd's murder in May 2020 are on trial. They're accused of violating Mr. Floyd's civil rights by failing to provide medical care when fellow officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for more than 9 minutes. Chauvin received a sentence of 22.5 years for George Floyd's murder. 2 of the officers are also charged with failing to stop Chauvin. On your TV, online and through your radio on DAB+, you're with GB News. Now, Headliners.
Thank you, Polly, and hello, everyone. Welcome to Headliners. In just a moment, I will introduce you to our guests. But first, let's take a look at Monday's front pages. These will be Tuesday's front pages, I believe. So we start with the Daily Mail, and they have PM's Mr. Brexit kill-off tax hike. That's David Frost, Lord Frost, demanding that April's national insurance hike must be scrapped. I think that's a raise in national insurance rather than a sponsored walk. The Guardian has Johnson faces fresh outrage over birthday party in number 10. There he is standing there, quite obviously holding a birthday cake, but that isn't the scandalous cake. That is one that he was presented with on a perfectly legitimate school visit, 19th of June 2020. Later that same day, he was eating his own cake in a secret room. Disgraceful. Birthday party for PM in first lockdown. That's the Independent. And another story concerning Islamophobia review, which sounds like a bit of a night on the town, doesn't it? No, Islamophobia review ignored by ministers. Tories accused of lacking the political will to fight anti-Muslim hatred. The Financial Times once again test my abilities to pass long, complicated sentences. NATO sends arms to allies for fear of lightning war on Kiev. Lightning war, previously known as the Blitzkrieg, of course, to which the Russians themselves were subject, so perhaps it's only fair they have a crack at it. Fresh losses batter NASDAQ is another headline there. The technology stock market in America taking a dive, entering a bear market, possibly. The Daily Telegraph have Biden prepares troops to face Putin threat. We'll be covering that shortly. And a young woman there in the snowy wastes has double-hatted in preparation for war. Metro, we have NATO jets ready to scramble, and how Boris had his cake and ate it. Two stories we're familiar with by now. The Daily Express has gone with Boris warns Putin of painful and bloody invasion. And quite hard to distinguish exactly what that military personnel is wearing there. Looks like quite a natty Palestinian flag, and what appears to be the sort of hazmat gear that they wear in warehouses when they're packaging fresh meat. Anyway, Boris Johnson has warned Vladimir Putin that invading Ukraine will lead to a painful, violent and bloody war. The Times has that same photograph again of Boris Johnson holding the cake. Looks like it might be a coffee flavour with a bit of fruit on the top. Johnson held lockdown birthday party at number 10. Crisis talks over Ukraine as US troops put on alert. Very much a normative consensus sort of front page there from the Times. The Eye, Johnson's problems grow. They're trying some sort of innuendo there. Johnson's problems grow with birthday park leak. It's full of innuendo, that. My God, it's disgraceful. And Tucko the Pitbull wins legal battle. I expect it's probably his owner, in fact, who's been represented in court. Daily Star, as always, rescues us from the humdrum. Bozo had big birthday bash with 30 chums while the rest of us were all in lockdown. That picture rather confounds that proposition, given that he is accepting it in the playground of a school. And Holden is latex symbol. Amanda Holden has occupied that part of the Daily Star's front page for the last few days. They're obviously in some sort of quite significant deal with her. We'll be going through those very shortly with my guests. So, those are the headlines. Tonight's guest we have with us a comedy giant, not just because he's an enormous talent, but he is very, very tall. And that's the only time we're ever going to do that. That's Leo Kearse. Also joining us is a pan-Atlantic comic. It says here, whether he's in the UK or the US, he gets panned everywhere. I don't like that, Scott. I think that was a bit rude and unnecessary.
Fair enough, though, actually.
Yeah, is it happening that way for you?
It's happened again and again.
You've come back quite recently. When did you land for us?
Just a few days ago, actually.
Are you feeling okay?
I'm all right. Thank God I escaped the US.
Are you West Coast or East Coast?
I'm West Coast.
So that was quite a long journey, and that can be quite a red-eye thing, but you've adapted.
Worth the tan line, though.
Yeah. You look absolutely gorgeous.
That's so sweet of you to say.
I am very jealous of your branded spectacles. I've got the off-brand version.
Bought them online for sale. We'll talk later.
Yeah, that's a fantastic bargain. So we're going to kick off with Tuesday's Telegraph. Reports on the escalation in Ukraine. How bad is it? Tuesday's Telegraph says that essentially, they all say this, the Americans, I think, have put 85,000 troops on standby. Is that right? Have you been covering this?
Yeah, so they're sending, I don't know if it's as many as 85,000, but they're certainly ramping up. The rhetoric is becoming a bit more serious. And also, America's pulled out its diplomats. They always seem to do this as a sort of as a statement. Like they said, America said they were boycotting the Winter Olympics.
Yeah, they certainly stepped up from that.
They weren't boycotting the Winter Olympics. They just pulled the diplomats out. Nobody wants to see the diplomats fighting or doing the javelin or whatever they do in the Winter Olympics. So yeah, and the European Union is saying they're going to hit Russia with more economic sanctions. But I don't know how severe these threats can actually be because Germany gets its gas. A lot of Europe gets its gas and energy from Russia. So we're not going to turn our heating off throughout January and February. So I mean, unless we start,
but that's like a domestic issue. To be honest, I think I might take this opportunity to teach the kids and the wife some of the hard brass tacks of life.
You're a man with 15 cardigans. Position to be able to afford to do that.
I have to sleep in a hat.
Yeah, our entire military strategy is based on everyone having as many cardigans as you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly looks like it's ramping up. Although there are some positive signs. There's not much talk of this on Russian state television. So it's not as if the president, before when he annexed Crimea and took that straight, President Putin was making a lot of fuss about it on TV and rattling a saber. So yeah.
Scott, what is your take on this? This is your government.
Well.
Is this your guy, Biden? Are you a Biden guy?
No, of course I voted for Trump.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm gay and
just for the drama.
I'm desperate for a way out of my marriage. But yes, no. I read too that Britain has stepped up their commitment. They sent 30 special trained soldiers. So that's why America had to send 85,000 because we're like, come on, you guys, balance it.
They're on standby. I mean, somebody said at this point it all looks very hypothetical, but of course, if a single one of those soldiers gets killed, then suddenly it's war, right?
Well, then we're number one.
Yeah.
We like to fight, so any reason to let John Wayne out of the cave and just start dropping bombs, whatever.
Have you ever heard of the Thucydides trap?
That was difficult. That was difficult to hear.
Thucydides. Thucydides, an ancient Greek historian, I think, one of the earliest ones, and he spoke about, I think it was Athens and Sparta. The 300, the movie. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Oh no, I love that film.
Yeah, a few stills of that.
Yeah, I got them in my brain right now. Go ahead.
So the whole point of that was that I think in this particular case it was Athens who were the America, and Sparta were coming up, and Athens had decided to strike hard. I may have it the wrong way around because. There's this fear that when you're a dying superpower, others will start to predate upon your rotting corpse, and so you have to. This is when the world is most at danger. This is what caused the First World War.
Like when comedians panic when the act's not going well.
Yeah, exactly. That's when they start lashing out. Exactly. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think America's been a dying democracy for several decades. People have predicted that. I think what's happening here seems to be that both America and Putin have forgotten that the world is a global economy. And as the leader of China just said recently at Davos, that we're all meant to be working together, not apart. So
He's such a together kind of guy, isn't he? He just want to throw his arms around the world.
He is cuddly.
At least around Taiwan.
Xi Jinping is just allowing this to happen. He's egging it on because meanwhile, while everybody's criticising America and Britain for their colonialist past, China's colonising so much of Southeast Asia and so much of Africa as well, buying up tracts of land and doing deals with people and getting them into debt traps that they can't pay back.
They're the Switzerland of the present era.
Yeah,
we'll be neutral, guys. We'll hold your coats.
But if you go to Athens, I did a gig in Athens recently, and the locals are kind of relieved that China and their businesses there because the port had been dying for so long, and it's thriving again. So
it's kind of weird just how good China is at business. I mean, people don't talk about that much, right? They are sinister, obviously. They still call it the CCP. It's got the word communist in the title. It clearly isn't communist. So, so what is their game? That's kind of that's a bit like what is it? The super rich Warren Buffett.
Oh, right.
I can't remember what it's called.
He seems like a very nice,
well, his company is still named after the paper mill that he bought in 1956 or something. No longer. It's like there was like these companies that officially sell office supplies.
Right.
Everything.
It is strange, though. You do think China isn't meant to be making so much money, but they are. I mean, it doesn't seem to be part of their ethos, but they're there on the front lines. I think the communist thing is just good sabotage. It's like when I used to tell people I was heterosexual, they'd be like, I'm not believing you. And so but it made for a good joke. And I think the Chinese, it makes for a good business deal because I think it puts people off and I think it makes them think, well, they're communists. So they don't have all the knowledge they should have. We're smarter than they are at making money. And then the Chinese turn around and by you.
We haven't adapted, have we? To the new reality.
People
were always 30 years behind. Some good news in Tuesday's Mail for Assange supporters. I don't know where GB News fans would sit on the Assange spectrum. I've always felt slightly conflicted about him myself. I can't say I instinctively like the guy, but this does feel like dirty tricks. Anyway, you got this one?
He's only 50. He looks terrible.
Well, he has been locked in an Ecuadorian broom cupboard.
He needs to get outdoors and eat some
he's
greens.
actually in Belmarsh prison now, in fact.
Well,
better than the Ecuadorian.
Hopefully. And he's always seemed to be, he's always had a needle in his, brow about Hillary Clinton. He just went after her and tried to destroy her election. She didn't run a good campaign, admittedly, but I always felt as though he might be a little bit, just a little bit, admittedly right-wing, which when people choose a wing, I always get uncomfortable because I feel like now I'm in opposition to what you're saying immediately. But revealing information is always probably good, although I think most people don't really understand what they're reading when they read his files.
No. I don't think most people do at all. But you have to judge it by the aftershocks, I guess, what happened, the exposure of Abu Ghraib and all of that, which I think that was him, wasn't it?
That was very impactful.
I've got to say, that was a good thing, right? We know that stuff went on.
It probably
on
turned
balance.
him right-wing, seeing all the information, all the secrets about Hillary Clinton. I think that would turn anybody right-wing. Seeing the open stuff about Hillary Clinton enough to turn me right-wing.
She's a smart lady, but she's got some issues. But I never really understood Assange's relationship with that soldier who then turned himself in and became a woman.
Chelsea Manning.
Who released some of his information.
Yeah.
Or that was never clear. I guess what I'd like to see is Assange before a jury. I'd like to actually see what the charges are and what's actually
before
occurred.
a jury where he isn't faced with the rest of his life in jail. It feels like there's so much at stake.
The tricky thing is, Simon, that if what he says he actually did, released classified information, then he did break the law, and he is technically a spy. So I guess he did know when he was doing that he's putting his own life at stake, and that's brave and admirable. And
other people's lives at stake
that is
as
true.
well. I mean, that's the issue. But on the other hand, I've got to say, if you're the Pentagon, if you're all these top military systems, and you can be hacked by Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange. But that's your system's flawed.
You should have been paying somebody to do that.
Which is the point they've been trying to make.
They can do it. China and Russia can definitely do it.
Yeah.
And it is interesting with the wing thing, how it swings. Edward Snowden, who was the second late wave of that kind of stuff, and he was covered by Glenn Greenwald, right? The journalist.
Another couple of spies.
And now Glenn Greenwald, who's now based in Brazil, right? He and owns over 30 dogs with his
under house arrest. Pretty much.
Weird kind of. But he is now like an enemy of the progressive left, whereas he was definitely identified with the progressive left in his American. These things like swing right across to the other side in terms of where they think the.
You have to be careful who you side with and who you think you're trying to defend, and then it becomes a question of how many laws are you willing to break before you're found innocent in a weird way, because the reporter from The Guardian did give classified information to his partner, his romantic partner, to cross international borders with. Now, they both knew they were breaking the law again. It's very complicated, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you wonder, I'm terrified.
Nobody's above the law, and if you break the law, of course, you must confront the law. But equally, not all law is equally moral, and sometimes progress is made by people taking that risk. But then, of course, the fact is that they have taken that risk because they are, the bravery consists in the fact that they may...
Well, and the manner that it was done. So, I mean, obviously some of the information revealed gross crimes by the American military, but on the other hand, he released so much information, and some of it there's agents in the field that were put at risk. So, I think you've got to do things in a controlled and sensible way.
Anyway, I've got to say, I'm slightly more comfortable with the present prospects of him actually going straight to America rather than back to Sweden on this, what seemed to me an extraordinarily trumped-up charge of sexual impropriety, which was clearly just going to be shifting me in through the back door. Well, we'll see how that pans out. He's only got that one possible loophole to clamber through, and we'll know about it one way or another quite soon. Now, this next story from The Guardian is quite refreshing. A minister has resigned on principle, it seems, just like the good old days, and not because he was caught red-handed with a tube of Pringles.
Who knew they still had principles? So Lord Agnew, so he's the minister responsible for efficiency. I didn't know we had one. He's resigned his post publicly in Parliament, saying he was unable to defend the way the government handled fraudulent COVID business loans. There's $4.3 billion of these fraudulent loans handed out. And that's on top of all the dodgy...
Pounds.
Huh?
4.3 billion pounds.
Pounds worth. What did I say?
You say dollars.
Oh
yeah,
my
yeah.
God,
You were still stuck in a sand world.
Yeah, pretty much the same at this point anyway.
Same
transatlantic.
Buckaroonies.
I mean, I'm surprised I'm not saying yuan. I'll be saying
shekels, whatever.
When Xi Jinping.
Yeah, 4.3 billion write-off.
Yeah, so on these dodgy, the government was just throwing. While some people were struggling, the government was just throwing businesses. It was so easy for businesses to claim money. But also, I mean, you had government ministers abusing the fast-track COVID scheme where, VIP contracts were handed out for PPE or for PCR testing. So you had Owen Patterson with Randox. Michelle Moan was giving out contracts allegedly to her husband's company, and Matt Hancock just gave it to somebody down the pub, which I respect. That's a very British way to do some fraud. So basically I'm surprised it took him this long to
He's
resign.
done well. He has a pair of even more off-brand spectacles than I do. I think they look as if they've been drawn onto his face. I read somewhere, I think it was a couple of days ago, and it was a story we didn't quite get onto, with a drug dealer in North London who managed to get a bounce-back loan.
Oh my God.
I think if you just demonstrate a degree of liquidity, that's all you got.
I got to call him back.
It was extraordinary. I don't know whether you took it, because as a stand-up comedian, there were no other sort of FOLO schemes. There were no other sort of financial supports, but cheap loans is basically, we'll have one of those then, I suppose.
If you're a coke dealer, then you can get some to see until the bank managers are doing the pub again.
I am impressed by the degree of money that's been sloshing around in the last year. And it has been hilarious for a government that, only 6 months before the thing was saying, where do you think this magic money tree is? Oh, OK, let's get the magic money tree out.
They did give us a couple of grants. And I remember thinking when I got my first one, I'm like, you mean this money's been laying around all this time? We could have had it. I could have been on vacation. I didn't have to be opening in Stratham. I could have been sitting on a beach in Hawaii. You didn't tell me. It took a disease, it took a pandemic to get some money out of you.
It is disappointing, isn't it?
Well,
but that's, I guess we're all confronting with some tough truths. We are coming to the end of part one, which means it's time for an ad break. These are the people who supply the funds that keep the channel ticking over, so please buy their goods and services. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you shortly. Thank you.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans, and with me are Leo Kearse and Scott Kapuru. Scott, you have this next one. Tuesday's Independent has a story about Burkina Faso, which I believe is on the continent of Africa.
It's somewhere there. It's in Western Africa. And I've been a bit out of the loop with this story. And I have to say, in my own defense, even the French embassy is confused. They're advising French nationals not to go outdoors, but that's just about it.
Wow.
And they're saying we're confused by what's going on.
Is
And
he
me
French?
too.
It's a French name, Kabore. Is it an ex-French colony?
Sure.
Right.
And Burkina Faso's President Kabore is detained in a coup attempt. Apparently, he's been incapable of stopping militant terrorist attacks in his own country. The result of which has meant that 30,000 schools across the country have been closed.
Wow.
Correct that, 3,000, a lot of schools have been closed.
Yeah.
And because of militant attacks. And so the public is in outrage, and they decided the military in his own country has gone in and kind of detained him, meaning he's been kidnapped and not heard from since a sport match on Sunday night where he was seen there.
I've got to say that photograph, it's obviously not pleasant, but it looks as if it could have almost been taken any day. I mean, that's a fairly sort of run, you know.
Sure. Yeah. It's one day on the street.
It's just like, how we keep warm.
But yes, but the soldiers are mutinizing, I made that word up, and they are demanding the sacking of the military. Yeah, they're angry. And they want the sacking of the military chief of staff and the intelligence services chief. They want them all fired and replaced because they can't keep track and keep up with they've had a lot of attacks from Al-Qaeda. Yeah. They share a border with Niger, and there's a lot of militant attacks coming from there.
That's Boko Haram, usually in Nigeria.
It is,
isn't it?
yeah, which is a lovely name for a terrible
Or is it a Man City, Man United kind of thing, or are they basically like side by side, or are they?
I think they are.
I'm not an absolute expert on the regional geopolitics of Burkina Faso. But it is interesting. This is just a few weeks after we had the anniversary of the January 6th, the Capitol being stormed in America. If you can
very
call it
similar situation.
Stormed. Well, everybody, like Kamala Harris, Joe Biden were on TV saying, "Oh yeah, it was like Pearl Harbor. It was like 9/11." It's like no, it wasn't. It's just a few like.
This
like
is what that's like.
This is a proper coup attempt. They've got soldiers. They've got tanks. They've got machine guns. Yeah. They kidnapped the president, possibly killed him. That's a proper coup attempt. It's not like some little old granny waving a flag.
There's a Hercules landing, but not stopping on the airstrip. You have to run and grab.
All American can produce is a yoga teacher with horns begging for vegan vegetables or whatever you want.
Now, the Met has covered itself in glory once again. This is with you, Leo. Some rather disturbing stories of misogyny in custody.
Yeah, so this is from 2013 was when this happened, and it's just come out because of the shocking murder of Sarah Everard by a serving Met officer. So this was the Met has been forced to pay compensation to Dr. Constantia Duff, who's the assistant professor of philosophy at the University of Nottingham.
And heiress to the beer fortune.
And basically she was arrested.
That's a Simpsons joke.
So she was arrested on the 5th of May 2013 on suspicion of obstructing and assaulting police. And what she did was she tried to hand a legal advice card to a 15-year-old who was caught in a stop and search sweep. So she was obviously being a good citizen and just informing a fellow citizen of his rights. And she was later cleared of the allegation in court. But she was arrested by the police and taken in. She was bound. She was strip searched, and the police said, "Treat her like a terrorist. I don't care." And in a cell, 3 female officers bound her by her hands and feet, pinned her to the floor, cut her clothes off with scissors. Duff described the ordeal, which left her with a number of visible injuries, as like a sexual assault. So this isn't happening in China or Belarus or Saudi Arabia. This is happening in the capital of a supposedly free country, and the police are doing this to somebody who their only crime was informing a citizen of their rights. It's really shocking.
And am I odd for thinking it's a little even more shocking that these were female officers that were treating her that badly? That's supposed to be a mitigating.
I think if it's something like this, the proper process is to have female officers.
But then in order that this sort of thing doesn't happen.
But then male officers came in and made all sorts of derogatory comments. One of them said, "What's that smell? Oh, it's her knickers. Is she rank? Just horrible things. You need defumigating.
And this has taken nearly a decade to emerge.
Yeah. So it's come out now because she said the payoff now. So it's terrible that it took this long to get the payoff, but also because we've seen the Sarah Everard murder, and then somebody else in the same unit was also charged with some sort of crime. I can't remember exactly what it was, but another misogynist crime.
Yeah. What do you think about this kind of thing, Scott? Does it shock you?
Well, I spent the night in prison once.
Right.
With a friend of mine.
Part of a stag do or something.
Right. No, I had to pay to be there. But no, this kid I knew, he broke the law, and I was in his car.
Yeah.
We were put in jail. It was really humiliating, really brutal.
Yeah.
And we were treated okay. So that story just really upsets me.
Yeah.
And you're right, the idea that women were involved, torturing and punishing a woman that way. Although this is the problem with gun control in this country, because women think they have equal power. The thing is, you give those chicks, a chance to, beat each other up, and they're going to.
They have an awful lot of devices strapped to their high-vis vests.
They do,
and it's
My sister bought a gun because she thought the terrorists could see her. I'm like, and I said, well, cut back on the rich desserts. I don't want, people owning guns, and I just feel like when I see the police with that sort of power, that sort of authority and control, abusing it, it's really, really upsetting. I mean, I kind of moved to this country to avoid that sort of thing, so when you talk about it, it really upsets me a lot.
It is interesting, although it's not entirely germane to the story, but when you go through the number of killings of unarmed suspects in America by police just shooting
We're
them dead,
number one.
Quite often those are female police officers as well, in fact, because I think, I'm just projecting here maybe, but I think they feel if things get out of hand, I'm not going to be able to cope.
More vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And one of them thought she pulled her taser.
She did. That testimony was so painful to watch, but they found her guilty nonetheless. And
I've seen women do that with a handbrake.
Yeah. It's also a huge responsibility if you're gonna take it on. I know people who, police officers, male and female in the U.S., that won't even pull cars over anymore because they're so afraid of what they're going to find when they walk up to that car.
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous situation. I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want it. I mean, I would not want that responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would probably.
They're at one point very brave, and I know they protect us and all that. And when you're in a small town, when you're playing like the Edinburgh Fringe, and you see the cops on the street, and they know who you are, you say hello to them. It all seems friendly and nice. But that's because we're all, frankly, because we're middle class and white, and we don't have the same kind of worries that an ethnic minority would have in this country, or in the US as well.
I even remember, it sounds absurd, like I'm going back to the Victorian era, but I used to fly pitch, which is basically you open a suitcase on top of a bin in the middle of the high street and sell some schmutter out of it, scrunchy hairbands or something.
Right.
And you would get to know the police officers, and some of them would move you on, some of them would look the other way or say, just keep it down or whatever, And some of them, there might be a new one, and then you'd have to produce your peddler's license, which was a bit of a bluff, some ridiculous bit of documentation. But there was a kind of sense that there was a little community, and there was a little bit of cat and mouse would go on that we recognised the individuals. It feels like we're kind of losing that.
I think the same used to be true in San Francisco where I grew up, but my uncle, who's an ex-police officer who retired a few years ago, said that the police officers are terrified because they're outnumbered.
Yeah.
And if we got the memos they got every day, we wouldn't leave the house.
Now, the Times is reporting there are more racist statues still lurking among us. Is this with you? This is somebody even predating William Coulson, I believe.
There is. There's a memorial to Tobias Rustat. He was a courtier to King Charles II, and he lived almost the entire stretch of the 17th century, quite wealthy, an investor and a director in the Royal African Company, which between 1663 and 1691 shipped more slaves across the Atlantic than any other business.
Wow.
They cornered the market, actually, and the worry is that he also set up, I read that he created the first fund for purchasing books at Cambridge.
Nice.
And that's why that statue is there.
Yeah.
But Cambridge is worried, and the college where the statue is worried that the money that he procured for the books was used by
it's tainted
trading
somewhat.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, it's that's how it goes, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is how it goes.
Most of these benefactors and philanthropists are to some extent cleansing their soul.
Yeah, listen,
nobody got rich in the 17th century from inventing a recycling stuff. It was all slave.
By making candles, I know, or by opening a yoga studio. I know it's true. And you don't want to know certain things about celebrities you follow. I read stories about Barbra Streisand. I'm like, I can't read it anymore.
Yeah.
She has a museum to herself in her own house. She's crazy. Turn the music on.
Every time a dog dies, she clones it and has
She does clone her dogs. She does.
Yeah.
She has 2 cloned dogs
the
right
dog
now.
just wants to die. It's just let me die. I'm 185 years old. Please let me die.
Don't play it.
Film Moon. The dog discovers.
It's got to hear the clones are like, not evergreen, not again. Yeah, no, it's horrible.
This guy, Tobias Rustat, I've got to say, I kind of admire the cold, hard glare of hatred projecting down the
He did work in the service
there.
of the king his entire life.
Yeah.
He was really in the inner circle. And actually, I think that he felt it was a just cause to do what he did.
And I like the way he calls it just the African company.
Yeah.
What exactly do you... Oh, you know, this and that, knick-knacks.
In service of the majesties. Yeah, we do what we need to do. And
extraordinary. So he's got a statue. And is it a statue still, or is that...
It's still up. They want to take the statue down and put up a plaque in its place explaining why they've put a plaque up and what he actually did.
I think in view of the way the wind is blowing, that's probably a reasonable compromise.
Right.
Rather than seeing it kind of attacked with hammers, right?
I think there's more slavery now than there was at the height of the transatlantic slave trade.
And
so
these people are not setting up libraries either, are they?
Well, no, they're not. And also, if people wanted to change the world, do some good, you can do it to the slavery that's happening now instead of trying to change something that's already happened.
Maybe instead of continuing to buy books, because there are enough books, to be honest, aren't there? Most kids have
more than
now.
enough. Yeah.
Why don't they use that money that would normally have been used to keep funding to, like, I don't know, set up a checkpoint in Dover?
Yeah.
You know, that randomly stops and searches transit vans that are coming in. Anyway, Cardinal Ratzinger has been caught out giving incorrect information to the authorities in Germany. I think this comes from the 1980s when he was a young man, barely into his 50s. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Who's got this one? This is Leo.
So, yeah, the former Pope Benedict XVI, if I had a better education. No, it's 16. 16, isn't it?
That's right.
Oh, my God. I didn't know I could speak Latin. So on Monday, he admitted providing incorrect information to a German inquiry about his presence at a 1980s meeting discussing a paedophile priest, blaming it on an oversight.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously he was, quite high-ranking in the church, in the Catholic Church, when they were covering up and moving priests around. So if a priest got caught, they'd move him to another parish. And obviously the priest loved it because it was fresh kids. But yeah, I mean, like, what's he worrying about? It's just the systematic, widespread abuse of children. You know what I mean?
It's difficult, though, because Benedict, he did, like, resign as Pope, which is pretty much unheard of because of his incipient Alzheimer's or dementia or some, I don't know if there are other brands of Alzheimer's.
Although they say
that... started genuinely forgetting about all that.
Maybe each day he didn't know. Wait, kids, what? But they actually say, too, I've read in the press, that he knew this story was tracing him, and he knew that this would come to call.
Do you think this is why he resigned, you mean?
I think it's part of the reason.
Okay.
Although, have you been to the Vatican? Have you been to the Vatican?
Not inside it. I've been into St. Peter's Square.
Right, there's a gay youth hostel and gym called Universal Gym right next to it.
Wow.
So apparently...
Does it have the same ceiling, the famous... just a little bit more saucy?
Mirrors, actually. Oh, they're so vain, those Italians. But yeah, I think that this sauciness that goes on in the Vatican, I mean, this is a different sort of story, obviously. It's horrible.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of morals being traded in the Vatican, and I think...
Well, you were saying earlier when we were just chatting about... No, somebody else was saying about this, that there used to be a lot more structural opportunities for gay men within the Catholic Church to have legitimate outlets for their sexuality. A bishop or a cardinal or even a priest might have a chauffeur who lived with him or whatever, and no questions were asked. In the same way that certain pop stars...
Wouldn't that distract them from driving?
Yeah, probably would. Maybe have to have the glass, barrier at the back. But this would be a way of rather than... You know what I mean? Like, rather than having to, well, not having to, but being tempted to.
Well, I think the Gucci shoes matching the hat says everything. I think it's hard to hide behind a gown. I mean, I think really, it's the campest religion on earth. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and sadly, those priests didn't come near me. But I think it's because I knew, and too knowing and too tall, and I could fight back. But I also feel like these stories, as they surface, you would think it would bring the Catholic Church down. But it just keeps coming back for more.
It's the longest-lasting institution in human history.
It's strange, isn't it? People still
go. It will probably survive another ad break. Don't go anywhere. Part 3 is the best bit. See you shortly.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. With me are Leo Kearse and Scott Capurro. Britain has delusions of grandeur, according to a man whose delusions of being significant might be some part of this story. This is from the Tuesday's Times. Scott?
It is. Paul Keating, who left office in 1996, said the UK was led by a disreputable government and labelled Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, as demented. She'd been interviewed in Sydney recently, and she was worried about the threat that China poses to Australia and the peace in Southeast Asia, and thinks that China's trying to sort of create some sort of war between Russia and Europe and get Australia involved. And he said this isn't just wrong, it's absolutely delusional. And he said that he thinks that Britain stepping in is only going to make it worse. It's a decaying government, a falling apart culture. They should stay home and keep their opinions to themselves.
So just to be clear, does he think that the idea that China presents a threat is delusional, or the idea that Britain could do anything about it if that threat were to manifest?
I think both, because he's the one who actually did, I was quoting when I said he'd seen the leader of China in Davos saying we all need to work together, it's a global economy.
Oh, okay.
And he said those are not the words of a warmonger.
No. And once I have the Sudetenland, that'll be it.
Exactly. And who's for the dominoes? So yes, I think, speaking of delusions of grandeur, I mean, the thought that Australia could get involved in any sort of battle, their navy consists of two guys named Tim in a canoe in red speedos waving as they pull up.
But then again, I think he says that the British, essentially, if after the 1970s had their east of Suez is none of our business kind of, principle. And we really don't put our navy that far out either. I don't know how much we have anymore. Was Keating, though, I'm reading between the lines here a little bit, was Keating, I think, was quite a strong Republican. I seem to remember doing an episode of The Crown. You remember The Crown? Right. So Charles and Diana go to Australia.
Right, they do.
Her being a massive hit with Australia absolutely undermines his... It may be before his time, but it certainly undermined the Australian Prime Minister or Premier's...
He was a Labour leader, which I think means the opposite there, because everything's upside down. I think in Australia, the way their toilets go backward... Exactly. So I think that, yes, he was quite conservative, and he was beat quite badly by John Howard, which was a Liberal National Coalition. And he's very concerned with even just the thought of European politics being involved in what's going on in his...
I do think, though, I will say that, I mean, Kevin Rudd, for instance, who's an ex-Australian Prime Minister, is an internationally renowned world expert on Chinese politics, Chinese intent, the culture of Chinese government, and so on. The Australians are not idiots as far as China is concerned. I think they quite resent the idea that Britain comes along and says to them, we really need to defend you little chaps against China. No, China is actually investing quite usefully in our country. We have an ongoing, useful, healthy,
He wants to support that.
China's invested. It sounds like it's investing heavily in this guy and what he says. Paul Keating. I don't know how much he's getting paid. He's, China's coming in and buying up, loads of land, loads of mines in Australia. And I don't know. I feel slightly insulted that an Australian, of all people, is criticising UK culture. I'd take it from an Italian. Australian.
Yes.
Australian.
Well,
mental.
Especially the way they've swung in the last, actually, under lockdown. I mean, they have kind of shown their true colours a little bit, I think. I always said there was this kind of ridiculous, lazy trope that the Australians were descended from convicts. I've always said it's the ones that are descended from the guards. The ones you've got to watch, you know.
They're quite insular, aren't they? Especially now, and I think they're worried about their own national safety. That's why they side with the Chinese, who have a very strong idea about identity and national safety.
But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I spent 6 months in Australia, it was very much then the prospect. In 1991, it was the prospect of them becoming a Japanese colony, and then Japan has sort of like shrunken. I mean, Japan is still a very powerful nation, a very strong economy, but they don't seem to be discussed at all when we talk about East Asia or projecting its power outside anymore.
I think they like to invest financially in other countries.
Yeah.
That's what they're concerned with.
I have a little bit of sympathy for Keating, but on balance, of course, ultimately, with Her Majesty. From Tuesday's Mail, we have a story about politicians abusing their power in just about the most mundane way possible, getting the plebs to spruce up their glamping pods and home the vineyards.
Yeah, I mean, this is not quite a rival for the £4.3 billion of bounce-back loans handed out by the government that are dodgy. So this is the Somerset Council chief, Claire Pestle. She bought a winery near Shaftesbury in Dorset in 2003. She rose to become Director of Commercial at South Somerset District Council. And when the staff were furloughed, she had them, while they're getting their furlough money, she used the staff on her winery, not even for council business, on her winery to build glamping pods, lay turf, and to remove a dead pig from her private vineyard.
Lovely. I love the fact that we all know what glamping pods are now.
and I know what a dead pig is.
Yeah, I can get that.
I admire her ambition, though, really.
Yeah.
A winery in Somerset? Ooh, man, that's a lot of work.
There are some people in this world who need, a clear-minded, strong-willed Somerset Council chief to tell them what to do when they're on furlough. They would only have gone to pieces otherwise, sat at home.
There's so much waste and profligacy in the public sector. I used to work in the public sector, and I worked as a management consultant going into places like the Skills Funding Agency and places like that. And I remember one place we went into. So we're auditing how the IT department was run. There's a guy with like 3 laptops in front of him. So he was doing his job and he was running a chicken farm. And he also had like an Airbnb or something as well. And, like, he was trading currency speculation.
See, we now get angry with our kids. My son, 14, often sits in front of the telly checking his WhatsApps and his Snapchats while we're supposed to be watching a movie. He's training for this, right? Double screening. He's preparing his brain.
He's a multitasker.
This is good. Next story has some legs to it. This is The Irishman. I don't know whether it's an unnecessarily stereotypical ethnic detail which shouldn't have been included. The Irishman who took his uncle's corpse to the post office apparently didn't know he was dead, Scott.
Well, Declan Haney says that he didn't know that his uncle was dead. Peter Doyle, his name is, that he dragged across town.
Peter Doyle?
His name is Peter Doyle.
That means father, doesn't it, Peter? That's
it's
nice.
Sweet,
I wonder
isn't
if that's just like father.
It's his uncle, though.
It's okay.
Maybe it's father and uncle.
Yeah.
Small town.
Somebody's father.
Could be, yeah. And he dragged him to the post office to pick up the guy's, pension check.
Yeah.
And they kind of propped them up against the counter, wrapped him around his face like a scarf so they couldn't tell. But they knew he was ill, but they didn't know that he died on the way there.
Oh, no.
And he said, look, I'm not an idiot. I knew he was dead. I mean, I thought he was alive. I wouldn't pretend he was dead. I would never do that,
So they just carried him in from the car?
Yes, they did. But they carried him from his flat under a bridge to the postal service. Yeah.
Wow.
But the thing is, the town is suspicious because this person, this Declan, has done this sort of thing before. 15 years ago, to be fair, but he stole his aunt's ATM, her debit card, and took her PIN code and took all her money.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago, and he's not been on the gear for 3 years, so he's fine.
He's a reformed man.
Completely reformed, and they're crazy to think
it's
that
a
he could do
mistake
that.
anyone can make. So
hello.
So did they ask like I don't know, what do you do? Prod him?
Yeah.
Blink twice for you.
They propped him up, and the staff there immediately knew, and they called the police right away. When the police got there, this Declan and his friend said, "What do you mean he's dead? Look at him," and he was dead. And now that's their defense, is that they couldn't have known. Right.
No.
Yeah. Why would they try that? Why would they even try that? Who tries that? He said. No one tries that.
It's a family
trap. He said, "I'm not cuckoo, am I? Am I cuckoo?" The police were like, "Well, the dead guy." hanging off your arm.
Considering he was making up these excuses on the spot, he didn't do too badly. I think. I mean, that's a bit.
It is a classic example, though, isn't it? Of if you like one man's death, it's a tragedy. A million is a statistic. But we're giving this story equal weight to the 4.3 billion in loans that have just been shut down.
It makes me.
This guy is trying to get 150 quid worth of pension out of his dad.
Probably less. Yeah.
London needs to suffer, according to a poll reported in the Times. I would tend to agree, Leo, but that's just a personal prejudice. What do you think?
I live in London and I think it's already suffering enough. But 3 in 5 people in the UK say it's fair for London and the South East to lose wealth so that regions can prosper. So a majority of voters think that London has to become less wealthy to achieve Boris Johnson's flagship policy of levelling up the rest of the country. But I thought levelling up was about increasing entrepreneurship and prosperity in those areas, not this sort of socialist redistribution. I don't see how closing down an artisanal bread shop in Chiswick is going to help, a pub in Newcastle.
No. Is that what people have in mind, or do they think? I suppose one thing they might have in mind is the relocation of major public entities. I mean, the BBC went to Manchester, right?
It's been happening already. So the BBC's moved to Manchester and to Glasgow as well. So and it makes sense for the civil service.
They are moving too, right?
So much cost savings if you move to cities.
So one of the things that keeps London property, most of the wealth in London is the property prices, right? And one thing that keeps those high is some of those high-end jobs, right? So if those move out, then maybe London will lose a certain
funneling illegal cash, that's a big money maker.
Yeah, well, the City of London is an extraordinary entity. I mean, it's just an octopus with its tentacles in tax evasion like outposts all around the world.
The problem is...
The idea that it's essentially this kind of... I mean, this is why they say those buildings have to look like cathedrals to kind of conceal the nefarious activities.
More camouflage. But the problem is, so many of the people who in the BBC who were told to move to Manchester never did.
Right.
So a lot of those studios are basically empty with nothing happening.
Well, I don't want to one thing we mustn't fall into on this programme is the trapper sounding bitchy about the BBC, but I have occasionally been asked to appear on BBC Breakfast. It's up in Salford. I did it on one occasion. It took out 48 hours of my life. You have to leave like lunchtime, stay in a hotel overnight, appear, and then you get...
You can imagine
if you watch BBC Breakfast now, you can see they are struggling a little bit to get... So it kind of feels to me like they've put one foot there and then they've stopped, and you kind of go, let's get more stuff up there, and it would actually make more sense of that.
Yeah, like greens, or sunshine. I mean, if you're a civil servant living here and you've lived here your whole life, and your family's here, your kids are here, their education is here, you can imagine how angry you'd be after serving your government for 30 years in a job that they're telling you to move to, I don't know, somewhere arguably horrible.
This is why the threats, everybody said that Brexit would cause all the financial people to move out of London, but it turns out they want to live in London. The banks have to stay in London.
That's really interesting, isn't it? The sentimental attachment that international bankers have have to London and didn't want to move to Frankfurt, which I've been told was lovely.
It is, but all the cocaine is here, though. So. Where they got to go.
This is the dirty little secret about keeping Dover open. That's why you can't afford to use the slave traders' money.
Well, thank God those cliffs are white. They'll keep chopping away at them, won't they?
Our next story has a teacher who brought a hockey puck to a gunfight, if I've understood this correctly.
Yes.
I haven't managed to see this story, so tell me about it.
I watched it. Carly Zacharias has come. She's a teacher in Michigan, in Berkeley, Michigan, and she's had 2 million views of her video on TikTok showing other teachers how to protect their students from school shootings.
Right.
And because her class was so open, there were windows on one side, the students were taught to jump out those, but what if they couldn't?
Yeah.
And the school door had been replaced, a metal door had been replaced by a wooden door with a window in it.
Right.
So she said, if they come in with guns, I've given all the students hockey pucks, which can really cause a lot of damage. As we know, hockey players get hurt all the time.
To throw at them?
To throw at them, to protect themselves, to distract them and throw at them. And she said, I gave the students hockey pucks. Of course, the students, so they started playing with them and were distracted.
Yeah.
So she tapes them double-sided to each desk.
Right.
So they're basically a weapon. Yes, she's weaponizing the kids to protect themselves. It's lunacy, and so many people from other countries have watched these videos and said, America's like a third world nation. One guy said, America's a third world nation with a Versace belt. It's crazy that these students are asked to, but what else can they do? The school shootings have gone up during the
pandemic. It's better than actually arming the kids. I mean, I guess you could have a snub-nosed automatic under every desk.
I guess you could. That's a good drag name, actually. Yeah. But yes, it's been horrible. Apparently, campuses have risen, school shootings committed and crime, 42 in 2021 alone.
I like the fact that it's as simply as a blunt weapon, though. I thought I was trying to read too much. I was thinking, like, do you slide it under his feet or something? No. Is he trying to create a sort of icy...
But I think... Oh, right, that's nice, like a strategy. No, I think these people they're hockey players locally, and they know how to handle it. She said, especially the puck number 30.
Oh, right.
And I guess
there's the right kind of density.
Yeah, I guess so. And people watching knows what she means.
But so many school shooters are pupils. So they come into the school and they shoot their bullies. So I think we need to bring back bullying and arm the bullies. Because bullies obviously, because they're bullying the school shooters, they have an innate ability to sniff outside.
They needed to bully them a bit more or a bit less.
Yes,
Again,
the bullies obviously have the right idea if they're already targeting the school shooters.
Yeah.
I never understand why the teachers aren't armed. They're the tallest ones in the room. They should really know how to fire a gun. I mean...
But they just not have a thing on the wall, like in case of emergency, like you have the little hammer, just like, but with an AK-47 behind glass. No, who's broken the glass? I don't know. It's a gamble, isn't it? The Sun is reporting that a South African man has joined the 8,400 mile high club, or rather, mile journey club, Leo.
So he hid in the front wheel section of a jumbo jet and survived a brutal 11-hour journey from South Africa to the Netherlands. So he's found yesterday in the wheel section below the fuselage. I mean, this has happened a lot of the times when people are so desperate to get out of some places and into the
But
West.
this isn't a place from which it's not a war zone. It's not a
very poor though.
So, it's very poor, and he might not be from South Africa. He might have travelled there from another country. And we saw, Afghanistan, when the US military pulled out, everybody was trying to climb.
That was like a panic, wasn't it?
It was horrible.
So this guy landed, by the look of the map, in Nairobi, and he managed to stay hidden while it landed.
He made
took
it
off again.
Across, a connecting flight. That he made just one patch of that journey. Because most people that tried, obviously the vast majority died. And there have been stories of people sitting outdoors at lunch near Gatwick, and bodies just drop near their table.
And presumably there's no oxygen and there's no heating.
They freeze to death right away.
I mean, the air's very thin at that altitude, but the real problem is the temperature, so it's minus 60 degrees, and also the actual mechanics of the landing gear coming back up into the cavity where you're hiding. That crushes people. But some people do survive. Last year, a stowaway survived a 5,600-mile flight by clinging to the wheel. But his friend, who was in the same cavity, plunged to his death, unfortunately.
Can you imagine how terrifying that is?
You almost have to emphasise that people die, because otherwise people are going to start thinking this is a viable alternative. But I cannot. I watched a movie just 2 nights ago called 14 Peaks about a Nepalese climber who's done all the Himalayan peaks in a single 7-month span, and that's about the same height, right? That's getting, in fact, that's lower, and even then they have to go up slowly, they have to. These guys have the red blood corpuscles that come from having lived at altitude their whole life. Still extraordinarily challenging.
And when Ryanair are doing the flights for $5.99, it doesn't seem worth it.
Right.
We are going to wrap it up there, folks. We didn't get onto the woman. I'm so sorry. You wanted to get onto the woman in Walmart. No, just say it very quickly.
The woman from Walmart trying to buy a kid.
We can get it over into Wednesdays. A woman Teresa she offered £500,000, right, for a kid, and that is an actionable offence, it turns out. But we are not going to be. That's all we have time for tonight. Thank you so much to our guests, Leo from Scotland and Scott from Legoland.
Namaste.
And it's been an absolute pleasure having you. I've been Simon Evans. This has been Headliners. Tomorrow night, I will be back here with 2 more guests. So look forward to seeing you then. Cheerio.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m.